DePIN would be the first sector that integrated directly with DeFi to provide sort of a non-recursive funding mechanism for like something that was productive.
If your unit is like a data center, right, or like a data center grade GPU, it makes sense potentially to open up a parallel market to finance that.
The most expensive hardware, I think, was probably like the 5G antennas from Helium. Like those were probably running like six grand.
Like you buy that piece of hardware, you're expecting some sort of a return on that, most likely, right? Like you probably didn't buy it out of charity to contribute out of this network.
At the very beginning, companies need to build up their own compute infra. So basically it's on site. There's a very high fixed cost. There's very high operational expenditures coming along, and it's not very scalable at all.
The reason that Solana in particular has become, the venue where a lot of DePINs are launching is like people feel that they can create liquidity for a capital asset in that environment, and they have the primitives in order to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure you're both in very good spirits. At the moment, everyone's in good spirits. We're down in Texas for LW3. I left the conference to come talk to you. So I'm excited to have this chat. But yeah, everyone, the vibes are good.
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate you taking the time to do this in the middle of the conference. I actually saw Omar yesterday. He was at the summit as well, and I know LW3 is super important, and again, really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us today, and for giving Yuan and me like a platform to like tell the story. I think the work that Gradient's doing is like super valuable, and hopefully it's valuable for you guys as well. And so just thank you off the bat.
I mean, no, of course. And Yuan, where are you dialing in from?
Actually, I'm dialing from Shanghai. So it's 3 a.m. for me right now. So I might be a little slow.
I thought you'd be at the Multicoin Summit as well, but you and I both next year we'll get the invite.
Yeah. So we have a few products in the pipeline. So I might need to skip this one. We'll definitely join the next one.
Next one once the token's live. But anyhow, why don't we jump into things? Thanks again for both joining in. Shayon, obviously, Multicoin is very well known in the space. You have a illustrious track record over there, and some outsized characters as part of the firm. But you're becoming, I think, a rising outsized character in the industry. So maybe you could, for those of you who don't know you yet, I think most people probably know Multicoin, but like for those of you who don't know Shayon, why don't you give us a little background on yourself?
Yeah, happy to. And yeah, thank you so much again, Mike, for having us. I'm Shayon. I'm a partner on the investment team at Multicoin. I've been with the firm for a little over 4 years. Over the course of that time, I've spent most of my time at the earliest stages, working with founders like Yuan, and focusing kind of on 2 specific layers of the stack. One is things that are super close to the metal and around block space. Things like MEV, LSDs, interop solutions, things of that nature. And the other is things that are like very explicitly at the application layer. And the way I define the application layer, candidly, is DePINs. It's sort of the most native crypto-enabled surface area for consumer applications. And so working with teams like Helium and Render and IO and HiveMapper has been super informative in us building out a thesis, one that is sort of more pointed and more narrow around what we consider to be sort of the next set of crypto native applications that are kind of novel and economically productive. And that's sort of why, kind of like transitioning into Gradient a little bit more. One of the reasons we were excited to partner with Yuan and Eric was having seen and been exposed to and worked with a handful of really sharp, promising entrepreneurs taking on the problem of orchestrating edge assets. We thought they had like a genuinely novel, set of practices and technologies to bring that to market and coordinate edge resources in a way that's super economically productive. And I'm sure we're going to get into that today in a little more detail. But yeah, we're super excited about the work they're doing and excited to jump into the details.
Yeah. So did you join as the Helium investment was happening, or was that your first? Like what? Yeah. What's the back? Because that's is that the granddaddy of DePINs?
Yeah. I joined the firm in the middle of 2020. I think we had made the Helium investment in 2019. And so it was sort of around the time, like I think around the time I was joining is when it was like HIP 20 and HIP 20, like the HIPs were still measured in like double digits, and it was like 20s or 30s. The improvement proposals were in that point. And this is relevant because Yuan had, that's where we first crossed paths, is when I sort of came on to the firm and I started working on some of the more protocol governance adjacent things in Helium. For those who aren't familiar, kind of Tushar and I have been fairly involved in sort of public contributors to protocol governance in Helium. We've worked pretty closely with Amir and Abhay and the team. And so Helium has obviously taken a bunch of different shots on goal in decentralized wireless more broadly, starting with LoRaWAN and IoT networks, and sort of the phase in the middle when they were focusing on 5G, and all the way to kind of the Wi-Fi offload mobile vision that you see in production today. But I joined the firm about a year after the investment, and sort of got involved in the weeds of it, kind of working on things like governance and economics design, and just sort of like the core overall roadmap. So yeah, Helium was done before, but I've been sort of really, really close to that team ever since, and think of them as
I feel like some kindred spiritship with Multicoin, because we both took a stab at trying to name the sector before it became DePIN, and both of our names lost out in the voting. But
I remember going to the TIPIN summit in September of 2022, and I remember having written the article with Tushar in I think it published in early 22, but late 21, Tushar and I were like, proof of physical work. This is going to be it. We're going to make this happen. We're going to like will this into existence. And then I think you guys came on the scene with TIPIN, and part of me inside was like, fuck, that one's a little better. Like, how are we going to, I don't really know. And then it turns out we both kind of lost out, and the Messiah guys came through with DePIN.
Sammy has a claim to fame now that he got to name a category in crypto, which is you get to retire on that. Anyhow, that's a cool introduction. There's so much good context in how you guys first became introduced, and just like broadly an understanding of the DePIN space. So Yuan, maybe to turn things over to you, because it sounds like you've been pretty deep in crypto for a while, but maybe just on the compute side. But yeah, it'd be great to get your story.
Great. So first, I want to thank you, Mike, for having me here. So my name is Yuan. I'm the co-founder of Gradient Network. So prior to starting Gradient, I spent a little bit more than 3 years with the Helium team. So primarily focusing on the growth and also operation side of things in the APAC region. So later, after Helium migrated to Solana, I also led a few initiatives that Helium collaborating with the Solana ecosystem projects, particularly in the DeFi space, because I think I help to do the liquidity bootstrap on the DeFi in the Solana ecosystem. Solana has quite a lot to offer, so we want every Helium community member to be able to taking advantage of that. Before that, I was working at NEO blockchain, mostly looking after the growth and marketing side of things. So I think 2 years after I worked at NEO, I also incubate a couple of DeFi projects in the ecosystem. So basically, that's my background. My co-founder, Eric, he's an investor from Hongshan Capital. It is one of the largest asset manager in the APAC region. So he's mostly looking into advanced technologies, cloud technology, and also crypto projects. So I think Eric and I complement each other pretty well on that front. So basically,
you're a real journeyman of crypto. You've seen some stuff.
I think DeFi and DePIN are probably the most two exciting verticals for me because I think DeFi is mostly you can optimize your allocation of financial resources. On the DePIN side, it's a way to organize and optimize allocation of physical and compute resources.
Sure.
So I think in a way it's very similar, but for me, I think DePIN is more exciting because I think it's a way to engage with the real economy and also probably the most prominent vertical that can actually create mass adoption in the coming few years. So I'm very excited.
We definitely agree. I think one of our original theses on the space is that DePIN would be the first sector that integrated directly with DeFi to provide sort of a non-recursive, funding mechanism for like something that was productive for both the space as well as like external, the rest of the meat space of the world. I don't know. I mean, have you guys seen that yet though? Like, have you guys seen a good DeFi to DePIN, like a financing option for hardware or anything along those lines yet? Like, I can't think of one, but maybe I'm just like not seeing it. Curious if you guys have.
I think there's definitely, if you think about sort of the variables as what is the unit, the atomic unit of the network. In the case of a Helium hotspot, if it's on the order of a few $100s, right? Like you can build out capacity to some degree of threshold scale without like extensive financing. There will always be people who will like, I think I remember in the early days of Helium, like this venture miner style deployment strategy where you'd have one or two sets of entities kind of like buy up a ton of hotspots and like, like roll them out in a certain region correctly. That sort of thing, continues to happen on the sides. But when I'm seeing sort of that like sort of borrow lend market or liquidity provision for the unit of account, it only becomes necessary when the unit is a certain cost. So for instance, if your unit is like a data center, right, or like a data center grade GPU, it makes sense potentially to open up a parallel market to finance that. I think given certain regulatory pressures, that it may take a little while for that sort of thing to really come into production. In general, our view is that the resources that you're coordinating, at scale in the form factor that DePINs present themselves in today, they most likely make most sense when each individual can sort of like manageably do it themselves, right? Like that's where the scale economies come from. It's like distributing tokens in a way that, an average retail user participant can onboard into the network. But, these things are all a spectrum, right? Like you'll get into a point where the unit of the network is just somehow so expensive that you need to crowdfund it. And I think you'll start to see more experimentation along that, like as these systems mature a little bit more.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, we do have seen some early projects who's trying to tokenize like the hardwares. And also, like there are some projects trying to tokenize the future yield from DePIN, and also projects trying to aggregate different DePIN projects together. So there's quite a lot of novel ideas happening, but I think it's still at a very early phase. I think probably there needs to be sometimes to iterate to make it very tangible and easy for the retail users to pick up that idea. But I think there are some exciting things happening on that front as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the most expensive hardware I think was probably like the 5G antennas from Helium. Like those were probably running what, like six grand. It was also like, I remember buying one of those and being like a huge box showing up, and I'm like, oh man, this is not going to be a straightforward plug this thing into the wall. You really needed to find someone that knew what the hell they were doing to get that installed.
Yeah, but I'd say like I'd say one element of like the whole financing or like meshing deep in with DeFi is maybe potentially creating like these money markets or like a financing structure for the asset itself. The other is that, like you buy that piece of hardware, you're expecting some sort of a return on that, most likely, right? Like you probably didn't buy it out of charity to contribute out of this network, which is why like the reason that Solana in particular has become, the venue where a lot of DePINs are launching is like people feel that they can create liquidity for a capital asset in that environment, and they have the primitives in order to do that. So, an AMM or a money market, all the basic things that you need in order to turn sort of the native token of the network into a productive capital asset. That's foundational because people think of their returns as contributors to the network in sort of, either token terms or dollar terms, and you need robust financial infrastructure for that to happen. That's the core thesis of all of these networks. Like you can't really aggregate all this infrastructure in an asset-light way if it's not attached and tethered to a capital asset. And like fundamentally, these are DeFi systems, right? Like every DePIN is like an integral part of like it's sort of a crypto native asset that has to live in that DeFi infrastructure for liquidity and for any other purposes. So I think there's like a lot of other ways in which these things intersect correctly.
Yeah. Turning to Gradient, maybe you just kind of lay the foundation for those of the listeners that don't really know what it is. Like what is Gradient?
Sure. So basically, we position us as the open layer for edge compute on Solana. First, we strongly believe that edge compute will be the next frontier for compute. We have seen a few iteration or evolution in the compute space in the past, right? At the very beginning, companies need to build up their own compute infra. So basically, it's on site. There's a very high fixed cost. There's very high operational expenditures coming along, and it's not very scalable at all. And later, when the cloud becomes a predominant way of accessing and providing compute, there's quite a lot of benefits happening, right? So first, there's no upfront RPAX. So basically, it's a linear variable cost that correlates with your scale of business. And thirdly, it's highly scalable. So that's why cloud compute it becomes so popular right now. But we have seen some recent trends and happenings in the compute space. So firstly, I think edge compute devices become very capable right now. So a very small or even consumer compute devices can deliver quite a significant amount of compute. So that's the foundation. And secondly, I think we have seen the growth and the demand for very low latency compute becomes more and more important. So for example, streaming, video content delivery, AI inferencing. So you kind of need that very quick, like locale aware compute resources happening. And thirdly, I think the privacy and the sovereignty of your data becomes a very important topic. So I think when everything combined together, it's very clearly that edge compute has its own advantages. You combine that with the DePIN thesis, like a very efficient way to organize a large pool of compute resources together. So when these two combine, we can find a way to do something, to create a platform, to create a marketplace for people to be using the edge compute resources.
I'm glad you brought that up. That was going to be my next question is like, as long as I've been in crypto, I feel like people have been talking about edge compute, and even like outside of crypto, edge compute has been this thing. Like it's like big data, like kind of. Some people talked about it. I don't know if it applied that much, but it sounds like the demand side is actually what has caught up to like, okay, now we actually have real use cases where this matters, or where people pay for it or really demand it.
And then, so I guess what I'll say is like what initially drew me, and maybe Mike from that perspective, like we've seen compute networks be a thing in crypto since 2017, from like, the early days of Render, Golem, and Akash all the way to, the things that the 50 different compute networks that exist today. I think what we've realized and seen is that maybe there's two things. Like one is compute is not fungible. And the configurations that compute come in matters a lot, which is what are the specific bandwidth and memory configurations around it. But more broadly, like on the supply side, what resources are you aggregating, and then how are you linking them matters a lot. Which is to say, the real differentiator here, and maybe Yuan can go into a little more detail on this, is the idea of orchestration, which is what assets are you picking and how do you think about meshing them together into a productive network so that they're able to handle some set of workloads. And then really what drew us to what Yuan's building with Gradient is a laser focus on building a robust orchestration system to handle a very specific set of practical workloads. And I don't want to spoil the finale here, and I'm sure Yuan will tell us a little bit about what those workloads are. But really, it's what hardware are you getting? How are you meshing it together? And then what is the right use case that you can map that hardware to? And I think Yuan probably has Yuan has very concrete answers for all three of those things. And so maybe I'll let him drive that part.
When talking about use cases, I think in the long run, what we want to do is we want to create an open platform that any kind of edge compute use cases can tap into our resource pool and can easily, using our middleware and our orchestration system, to do whatever they want to do. As Shayon said, we need to find the MF and a few use cases at the very beginning. So for us, we are focusing on few verticals. So first, content delivery network for beginners. And also serverless function. And I think later on, we'll also tap into the edge AI side of things. So basically, those are the three domains we'll be focusing for now. And also in terms of the resource aggregation and in terms of the orchestration platform that we want to set up, we also want to build up corresponding infrastructure related to that as well.
Got it. So then for those specific verticals, CDNs or on the AI side, are you guys trying to build the app, like build that layer as well? Or are you going out to existing centralized or decentralized CDNs and saying, hey, you should use our resources as opposed to like building out your own infrastructure? So
we are definitely going to build out the vertically integrated solution. The first several use cases, particularly CDN and serverless functions. Because if we want to know the capacity and to trying to test things out, we need to have the full cycle, understanding each different layers, from the networking layer and to the resource aggregation layer and to the orchestration layer. Like what's the important things and what's the practical part of the things that we need to figure out. And then at some point, when the infrastructure and the stack is more mature, then we can offer the resources to other projects who want to use the resources later on. But at the beginning, we are trying to complete the full cycle of these few use cases by ourselves.
And then just getting into the resource side, I think I saw you've aggregated at least 70,000 nodes over the past couple of months. Can you talk a little bit more about like, are these individual contributors or these data centers? Like what's actually, what's coming online onto Gradient?
Actually, we launched our first product, the Sentinel, in early September. That's a little bit more than 2 months ago. So Sentinel is a very lightweight product in the form of a browser plugin. What it does is basically two arbitrary nodes in the world. We're having this peer-to-peer connection capacity. We enable two arbitrary nodes, even without like public IP addresses, to connect with each other. So what it does is first we are accumulating data, like how two different nodes can connect it in terms of latency, in terms of their NAT profile, so that we can have a very good understanding of how the global connectivity is like. So in the future, when we're trying to orchestrating latency sensitive services, we know exactly how we can match our nodes and the client who want to consume either content or the compute resources together. So that's the first part of our journey. We're building, we call it pervasive networking layer. That's our first step. So for the nodes you have seen, it's mostly just average users. It's not from institutions or data centers at this point. So we have covered more than 200 countries for now. So it's quite exciting for us.
It's been interesting to see, and I think Grass unlocked this idea of the browser plugin. I think like more teams are using that as the really strong go-to-market strategy. I was actually looking into trying to get a developer to build like single browser plugin. You get all of them in one plugin. I haven't seen that yet, but Shayon, if someone comes to you, pass them our way as well. This would be an interesting distribution model if like someone can aggregate all of them into one plugin. But anyhow, maybe like just turning to the fundraise, you kind of alluded this a little bit. I know it already happened, but like you obviously knew the team from Helium, so you guys have known each other for a long time. But like, was it like, oh, we need to build like this is a use case out there? Like, how did you guys? Were you brainstorming ideas? You kind of pieced out from Helium. You were doing DeFi stuff. Like, how did it come back together?
The first time I met Yuan was 2 years ago when we were working on some of the Helium economics redesign proposals. And so Tushar and Abhay and I were sort of jamming on what it could look like to, theoretically design a new model for the asset. And, we had authored these proposals, HIP 50, 51, and 52, or we were contributors to those proposals. And then Yuan called me a few weeks after we had put those out. And he said, hey, this is really stupid because these are where all of the gaps are. And if you launch it in this way and your system is designed this way, I will arbitrage it and we will break it in these ways. And so at that point, I knew that, Yuan is sort of an adversarial distributed systems thinker, understands how capital markets and, these distributed systems will intersect in the right ways. And, we sort of like gotten to know each other around that point. But then, fast forward to, him reaching out, what was it, maybe like 9 months ago, Yuan, something like that.
Yes.
Really when we got excited was, he told me the story of a company called Shunlei, which was essentially a Chinese company that delivers CDN resources or delivers content for a lot of the major consumer apps in China. And they don't have, data center grade hardware. They're essentially doing content delivery via edge resource network. And so that proved to me that this is in theory possible, that you can actually, functionally deliver these resources correctly. And if there was anyone in the world who was going to understand that orchestration system and then build it out in a way that was pragmatic in theoretically new markets outside of China, which is I think what Yuan is focused on. It was going to be him and Eric, who I was introduced to at that point. And so we started this conversation. It felt like there was a very clear path in terms of what is this apply to orchestrate, what that orchestration looks like correctly, and then how do you productize those resources once they're on the network, which is specifically for content delivery and potentially with a call option to add things around serverless functions or potentially inference. And so we had that conversation about 9 months ago. We sort of were super excited about that. We were joined with folks over at Hongshan and Terra and putting that round together, and been grinding on the vision since, and clearly there's a material product to show for it. Yuan, if you want to add a little bit more about the fundraising story here.
Yeah, so for the fundraising, we have a very targeted approach. Actually, we just talked to a handful of funds. Multicoin is definitely on the top of our list because we have collaborated before, and also because I think in the DePIN space, Multicoin is probably the most famous and most established fund on this. So yeah, we talked to a handful of funds and we close our round pretty quickly. Basically, that's it. When we are selecting funds to talk to different funds, instead of just on the financial side of things, the most thing we are looking for is like a very comprehensive support from the funds. So Shayon has been very helpful, and also Pantera and Hongshan has been very helpful in the process that we are building our product. So I remember Shayon once told us that, okay, so you shouldn't just think me as an investor. You should think me as one of your team member. So reach out whenever you want anything. So I think that sentiment stuck with me very deeply, and I'm truly grateful for that.
I see you've prepped him well for this conversation.
Yeah. Yuan will be receiving the payment that I promised him for saying these words on this.
Yeah. He's like, that's a telegram message to us. Like, that's what you need to say. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the Helium investment and a bunch of stuff you guys have done with various other like Render and HiveMapper have certainly established the brand in the space. And having had the opportunity to work together, it's always cool to see people. It's maybe sad to see someone leave a portfolio company, but when they go out and build something new, especially something you want to invest in, that's always, I think, an ideal scenario. So you talked a little bit about, let's say, like we have this go-to-market around initially on the CDN side, aggregating this network using the browser plugin, and then I think there's like, if I understand, there's like a phase 2, which is like, is at that point like more resources come on, or what's the expected sequencing for the network to go live? For
the first stage, building up the networking layer, I think we made a pretty good progress there. So right now we have accumulated like enough data points for us to move forward to the second stage. So I think later this year or at the beginning of next year, depends on our progress. We're launching our second phase, resource aggregation, and also we call it homogenized compute layer in the second stage. Basically, what we're trying to do is we want to incorporate the edge data centers, your personal compute devices, and also maybe we're launching our own specialized hardwares to create this layer. So basically what we want to do is we want to virtualize and commoditize the bandwidth and also the compute resources on those devices, and to create a pool of resource that we want to serve to Web2 clients. And so that's the second stage. I think the third stage is the orchestration layer on top. Actually, we are building these two layers in parallel right now. But I think we'll be launching the resource aggregation layer first, and then the orchestration layer.
Cool. On the CDN side is like CDNs definitely aren't something like the average person thinks about. But then you had the Tyson fight happen, and like for the first time, people were like, "Oh, I kind of get why the existing infrastructure that's available today is not at capacity for the way the world works." And yeah, you had like everyone, Dave Portnoy from Barstool like tweeting about it. So it was just cool to like have this moment where people could understand like how decentralized solutions could potentially contribute to solving some of these problems, which are only going to get bigger, like significantly bigger over the next decade.
I think it's interesting to try and understand what is the market structure across different geographies. So for instance, in the US, Cloudflare and Akamai and any number of other kind of enterprise grade content delivery providers have pretty robust points of presence across the US and in kind of major Western metro markets. If you look at sort of certain geographies in the world where there is a higher density of kind of content consumption in terms of like high mobile penetration patterns and huge amount of video being consumed or content being consumed on kind of social platforms, but not as much of a robust kind of enterprise data center kind of like CDN network being built out. We generally think that those markets are really interesting for a network that sort of looks like this as a potential offload solution. And I think the other thing on the demand side that's interesting is, most of the consumer apps or most of the content providers are not necessarily locked into one specific content delivery provider either. It's not as though like a theoretical consumer app is going to just pick Cloudflare as their sole provider for content delivery. Across the world, there are different configurations where you have multiple service providers depending on the region and sort of offload and bandwidth and depending on the specific configuration of what needs to be delivered and to whom, you may have different kind of service providers for this function. And so even in the case that we were talking about with Shunlei, for instance, they're not the sole provider. They're handling potentially a minority of the traffic that those platforms are using. But the important thing to recognize is that the market, it's not a single service provider market structure, and you can add on resources in this way. That's sort of the thing that we thought was compelling about being able to build this into the kind of sales motion.
Yeah, and as far as conversations maybe you're having with the demand side, are you like what's the typical profile of, is it like a media company based in China? Like what does it look like right now?
So I think mostly we want to focusing on the emerging markets, such as Southeast Asia and South America. So as Shayon mentioned, I think in terms of the developed markets, such as US and Europe, they have a pretty robust CDN infrastructure there. So as we mentioned, sometimes at a peak, there might be some glitches, but overall, so there's quite a strong infrastructure already exists. And secondly, I think for the media companies, for the streaming companies, because the ARPU in those markets are fairly high, so they have they can cover the cost of the networking side of the cost pretty comfortably. But the case in the emerging markets is quite different. So the ARPU is fairly low. So video platforms and they have a very urgent need to lower the cost on the networking side of things. So that's why they have very strong incentives to try out different new technologies to achieve the price reduction side of things. So I think Southeast Asia and South America will be the market that we are going to be focusing on in the coming few years.
It's awesome. Well, yeah, once again, thanks for joining. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Shayon, and it's great to meet you for the first time and hear more about Gradient. We'll obviously leave all like the Twitter, follow, places for people to keep in touch. But if there's anything outside of those standard places, something else you want to make sure we share with listeners.
We have to get a drink in the books.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's always a crypto conference to celebrate at. So we'll plan on it. Maybe we'll see you in Tahoe in January.
You will.
Yes. Well, thanks so much, guys. Great to talk about this space. Super exciting. We love the DePIN category, and looking forward to following along and getting involved.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time, Mike.